could you sign me up for some conspiracy theory? Because there's a lot out there. There's a whole menu of it to feast off of when it comes to cruising and other things. Hey, what's up, everybody? Tony with Lido Loca. Welcome to the show. I got your cruise updates. Let's go for it. There's a lot to talk about. Let's first look at the stock market because some of it's tied to this. I made the bold statement yesterday that the industry tends to trend together. Very rarely, if you look at the majors, will you have one up and two down and two up and one down? They all go in the same way. Yeah, that was a dumb thing to say. They went different ways yesterday, but not by much. Carnival Cruise Line opening up $14.97, closing out yesterday $15.04. Royal Caribbean starting at $14.34. and dropping to $14.15 by the end of the day, a small mover. And then Norwegian following Carnival. How about that? Let's just say it like that. $15.20, closing out at $15.23. Two up, one down. Yeah, it happens, you know. Of course, after I said it. Another thing I said yesterday is that the Carnival Fantasy is going to be scrapped, that I read several reports that the Carnival Fantasy is going to be scrapped. Well, I did read several reports that the Carnival Fantasy most likely will be scrapped, but you can still book the Carnival Fantasy. So, rightfully so, people are saying, well, is it scrapped? Is it not scrapped? I trust the sources. I do believe that the Carnival Fantasy is going to be scrapped, but right now you can still book the cruise. So take that for what it's worth. Look, I wouldn't mind if the Carnival Fantasy didn't get scrapped. I like that cruise ship. So here's hoping for that. But let's jump back into the stock market and let's talk about some of these conspiracy theories that came to light yesterday, at least in the cruising space, proffered by our friend over there traveling with Bruce. Now, I've got a good relationship with Bruce and I do respect what Bruce does. So there's no disrespect to Bruce with this, but what he said has raised a little bit of controversy in the cruising space. So I thought I would talk about it here. We don't usually get too political, so take that for what it's worth. But the crux of the Bruce story was that there were a couple financial institutions that downgraded the stocks of the cruise line, Carnival and Norwegian specifically, a firm called SunTrust. I don't know if that's associated with big SunTrust Financial, SunTrust Banks, and this other one called Macquarie. And analysts over there downgraded the stocks in one version or another. That's the too long didn't read version of it. But he also said that there was some insider information that said that currently the White House has control over the CDC, and because of the upcoming election, they are directing the CDC to not let cruising start again until after the election. Again, that's the summary version of it. So, it's interesting. This blew up all over all the cruising communities. People saying, did you see Bruce? What is it? Do you think? And here's the deal. I dug into it a little bit. I don't know. The information that is correct for sure is that SunTrust and the Macquarie downgraded those stocks. Those are analysts. That's what stock analysts do. There was some other stock analysts on Sunday that said that Carnival's a good buy. So that's the way the stock business works. I don't know about this inside information, but you're going to have to decide that on your own. I don't find any credible evidence that now the White House is controlling the seat. It's interesting. Through this whole thing, I just want to talk about conspiracy theory for like 10 seconds, and then we'll move back on to something else. But help me out. So I'm a little bit, you got to show me for me to know exactly that there's a lot of people. We got too much time on our hands a little bit. Now, when it comes to the pandemic, this is what I think. I think that you see places in the world where the pandemic numbers are going lower and they're opening back up. New Zealand, a good example. They got rid of the COVID. They're opening back up. Places in Europe, they figured out a way to deal with the virus, opening back up. Very cautious, but opening back up. I tell you one reason why cruising might not start back up in the United States is we don't have control of anything. And that's not me being critical of the United States. That's just me looking at what, and maybe it's the mainstream media that's polluted my brain. What's the point? Here it is. So at the end of the day, these are the things I like to think about in my quiet time. Let's figure out what the conspiracy is. So I've heard a couple conspiracies. The first conspiracy that I heard is that there's a new world order that's being controlled by like Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey and other people like that. And their whole goal is population control through vaccination. And the COVID is just the tool that they're using either to test the waters or to seize total control of everybody. New world order. The next conspiracy theory that I've heard is that this is politicized and that this is about American politics. So American politicians have killed people across the globe to fix the election, to grab power in November. And so this is all about that. The whole mask wearing is to seize control so that liberties can be taken away from us. And this is a completely American conspiracy. Killing people. Here's the thing about killing people. You know that if you can kill someone without a conscience, that usually means you're like a sociopath. And so for this conspiracy to play out, there has to be, hundreds of sociopaths that are complicit in this conspiracy, killing strangers across the world to fix an election. It's out there. It's a theory. Look, I also am a man of faith, and I've spent a fair amount of time watching people tell me that the mask is the mark of the beast. So a biblical prophecy fulfillment is what's going on here. And then there is another option that there's a virus that came out from nature, and nobody knows what to do with it. And we've got healthcare officials that we've had in place for a long time trying to tell us the best thing to do to deal with it. There's that option too. So all of those things are out there. Leave a comment below. What's your favorite conspiracy theory? I don't see any information about the thing that Bruce talked about other than the devaluation of the stocks. I haven't been able to find the other source. I'm sure Bruce will have more info about it as time goes on. A lot of people ask me what I thought about that. I'm still holding to the fact that I think that this is some natural occurring phenomena, and the world is not reacting well to it. And in some places, they're doing better than others. That's kind of my take on it. So I want to move on to a little Star Wars talk. I want to use Star Wars as an analogy for cruising. One of the greatest scenes, I think, of course, Empire Strikes Back, the best Star Wars movie. If you don't agree with that, then we can't be friends. But let's go back to episode 4. Let's go back to Tatooine. Let's go back to Luke Skywalker taking R2-D2 and C-3PO to find old Ben. Old Ben Kenobi. They find old Ben Kenobi in the little hovel that Obi-Wan lives in. All of a sudden, Princess Leia pops out of R2-D2. Help me, Obi-Wan. You are our only hope. Help me, Obi-Wan. Well, I've been thinking about this for a few days. What is cruising's only hope? Look, it's a mess here in the United States. The numbers are everywhere. I don't think there's really a clear path that cruising's going to start up. There's dates that are moving all the time. All we can really do is sit, wait, cross our fingers, and hope that things work out. But the interesting thing, the Help Me, Obi-Wan movement, is the rest of the world is beginning to cruise. And you would be right. The majority of cruisers are U.S. cruisers. So it begs the question, what happens if the U.S. cruiser cannot cruise? Which could be a very real possibility for a little while until all this stuff gets back to normal. We can't travel outside the country. There's not going to be cruises in the U.S. in the short term. What are we going to do? Can cruising stay viable? Of course, they can borrow as much money as possible and just stay open with no revenue, but that is not a sustainable business model. So as they open up across the globe, is there enough cruising to keep them afloat? Get it? Thank you. I worked up for 8 minutes to get to say afloat, or however long it's been. Okay, here's what I'm going to show you. So CLIA, the Cruise Line Association, they are the industry association for cruising. They put out these reports every year. They put out a cruise trends and industry outlook. This is the 2019 version. They do this every year, but let's dig into it. The couple slides that I want to show you, and again, this won't be much before I make some commentary and conclusions. Here's their data, right? Everybody's worried about data, but here's their data. Let's just assume their data is correct. If you look there in 2019, 30 million people went on a cruise. That's a lot. And if you look at it, it's growing year over year. I can't wait to see what next year looks like. 30 million people went cruising, okay? Let's look at where those people cruise to, the deployment of the cruise ships. Notice the Caribbean, not surprising, it's got the biggest percentage, but it only has 34.4%. So less than 50% of the cruising happens in the Caribbean. Let's start to build a picture. 30 million people, less than half of those people are cruising to the Caribbean. That means cruising's happening other places. And now let's jump over here. 11.9 million passengers are United States passengers. Let's call it 12 million. 30 million minus 12 million. That means 18 million people cruise that are not United States cruisers, and they cruise to 60% places other than the Caribbean. Now, to be fair, let's go back to the slide. Let's add Alaska in there because I doubt there's going to be any cruising to Alaska. So that's another, we'll call it 5%. So let's just say 40% of the cruising is Alaska and the Caribbean. That means that 60% of the cruising is other places. This is good news. I'm going to take it as good news. I'm going to take it as an Obi-Wan moment. You are our only hope. If cruising does not start up in the United States, I don't believe that cruising's sunk. There's a lot of naysayers out there loving to throw that language around. Cruising's over. But the reality is cruising may be over right now in the United States, but it's starting back up everywhere else. So take that as a positive sign. I wanted to put that out there as a little bit of a beacon of light because we tend to get really depressed, frustrated, on the chip. I like to use that phrase, on the chip, as we see stuff like, you know, all these conspiracy theories, as we see our cruises get canceled. It's natural, but don't lose hope. Just like Princess Leia did not lose hope, there could be a brighter tomorrow, and you might find out that your brother's a Jedi. Thanks so much for stopping by. Tony with Lido Loca. See you on the Lido. Bye.